FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Welcome. You are listening to and hopefully even watching the Financial Survival Network. I'm Kerry Lutz. Today is 10/5/20. Well, somebody you've all been waiting for. I've been getting emails, comments on the YouTube channel, and general inquiries. Where is he? Talking about John Rubino. And send us an email at kl@kerrylutz.com. Let us know how happy you are that John is back. So John, a little staycation in the fiery state there of Washington State, but you are back now, and welcome.
Hey, Kerry. Did I miss anything? Did anything happen while I was gone?
Nah, it was quiet. Pretty quiet. Just the debate, the election, the October surprise, your recent article. You seem to have been keeping up on things.
Yeah, I'm doing my best to pay attention, but it's getting harder and harder because so much stuff is so dark now. Man, it's hard to be immersed in this stuff and not let it affect you psychologically, because just so much weird stuff is happening between the pandemic and these forest fires out west. It's apocalyptic out here. I took the month off from media to free up time to be able to explore my new home in northern Washington. And I got maybe a week and a half in the month of September to do that, because the forest fires blanketed everything in smoke out here. So yeah, a lockdown and a apocalyptic fire, that combines to create a really weird psychological situation. So hopefully all of this stuff is going to end soon. They've got to, the pandemic is looking like it has legs, more so than people thought. It's looking harder and harder for us to get beyond it, but at least it's not forest fire season anymore pretty soon here. It's going to start raining and that'll be that, but God. And okay, I guess Trump is probably subject number one here. The debate, I didn't watch the debate, but I was in a house where my son was hanging out, and he kept coming up and going, "Oh my God, this is so terrible. I can't believe this." And then I was getting texts from people saying, "Trump said this and Trump said that, and Biden told him to shut up." It was one of those things where I was so glad that I wasn't watching, but I still couldn't look away. I had to listen. So, and I have no idea what the political fallout of something like that is going to be, whether it's a good thing or bad thing for either candidate. But it seemed to disturb an awful lot of people. Yeah. And then immediately Trump gets tests positive for coronavirus right after that. So this is just an amazing week. Hopefully he survives. It sounds like he's basically okay. And they're talking about him being released from the hospital today. So that at least is a good thing. The last thing you want is a sick president in the last month of a presidential campaign, because things were crazy enough already. They don't need to be any more crazy than they already are.
Yeah, that we're really kind of at the tail end. My take, I watched a little bit of the debate. It was kind of hard to stomach, but my take is I can't look at it from knowledge of the issues or who made this point or that. Strictly optics. Trump dominated both the moderator and Biden, and really Americans are really predisposed towards the more aggressive candidate. It's just the way it kind of works. And there was a survey taken, a poll by Univision or one of those, Telemundo, of who they thought won, and the Hispanic community was 2/3 for Trump. So that kind of really sums it all up. In terms of substance, Trump could have landed a knockout blow for sure, but he blew it because he was too off his game. He definitely wasn't on his game. But in terms of who won it anyway, I think probably it was Trump. And we'll see how accurate these polls really are, John.
Well, yeah, and that might be the last debate, depending on how long it takes Trump to completely recover. So, we might be heading into the election with basically what we've got right now, which, depends on your point of view, whether that's a good thing or bad thing. It would have been nice to have this play out semi-normally, but it looks like we're not going to get that option. And then the Supreme Court becomes an issue too, because some senators, all Republicans so far, have tested positive for coronavirus. And that is kind of throwing a wrench into the deliberations over the next Supreme Court nominee. And they really want to get that done before the election, obviously. So who knows how that plays out, but it looks like they can do, some of the hearings on video, and then senators have to show up and vote in person. And so it looks like it's still possibly doable, but it does kind of, screw with the timeline a little bit here too. But that's, okay, here's a scenario where they get the Supreme Court nominee installed, approved and installed, and then Trump loses the election. That still leaves him as one of the most consequential presidents ever. I mean, 3 conservative Supreme Court justices named in 1 4-year term is pretty extraordinary. That's not the kind of thing that happens very often, and it'll affect at least the Supreme Court for the next generation. Really, it could be 20 or 30 years that these guys are still there.
Yeah, for sure. And the game plan is, take the vote, I think, on the 19th, so they'll have had their 2 weeks. And now the CDC has said, if you don't have temperature 10 days, quarantine is probably adequate. And I think McConnell or somebody said, or maybe Lindsey Graham, that if they had to bring those senators in on stretchers, they were going to bring them in and the vote was going to get done. And I have no doubt that the vote will get done and that she will be confirmed.
Yeah, see, that sets up a really interesting political 2021, because again, assuming the Democrats take control of the presidency and the Senate, which that's a big assumption, but assuming that they do, that's when things get really interesting, because they're going to want to try to pack the Supreme Court to add 3 or 4 or 5 new justices and then name them all themselves, which is, the Democrats now have the attitude that, well, the gloves are off. And whatever we do, we're just behaving the same way the Republicans are behaving. So let's go ahead and do it. And that is going to be a really interesting situation if they try to do something like that. And it'll be interesting to see how people respond, because in this world, anything is possible. It's really hard to predict how voters respond to anything anymore. But that could be one of the things that dominates 2021, along with the global financial crisis that's almost certain to come pretty soon, and may have been speeded up by the pandemic. So, it's completely possible that 2021 is crazier than 2020, as counterintuitive as that sounds. It's hard to picture a year that's crazier than this, but it could easily be more unstable than this year has been. And from a financial market standpoint, it's fairly easy to picture instability, because stocks are wildly overvalued at the same time that the economy isn't really recovering in a meaningful way, because the stimulus that had been keeping people going, they kept consumer spending on life support by sending checks to everybody and giving loans to all the small businesses. But then those things have run out. And if they aren't replaced, we'll head back into a recession, or into a deeper recession next year, which kind of implies that a big stimulus plan is coming, because, the guys in the House and Senate, they know this, right? And they've been kind of dithering and playing the whole new stimulus plan for political advantage. But it could be that there's no political advantage for anybody in letting the system fall even deeper into recession than it is now. So I think we'll see a big stimulus plan of some sort pretty soon. And the only question will be what it means for states and cities, because I think that's the big sticking point. Everybody wants to give small business loans and everybody wants to send out another stimulus check because that's politically a good thing, no matter where you are on the spectrum. But helping out these really badly run cities and states, which is what the Democrats want to do, makes no political sense for the Republicans, because giving a bunch of money to like Chicago or something like that just kind of rewards them for horrendous behavior in the past few years, or really past few decades. And it makes no sense politically for the Republicans to do that. And I think that's the big sticking point. So that's going to be the big deal with the coming stimulus package. We know what some components are, but the question is, how big will the bailout for states and localities be?
That's a good question, and I tend to think that they've been playing a game of chicken, and the Democrats are going to blink. There's just a lot of anger at these badly run cities and states, especially for allowing the riots to continue unfettered, not taking any steps to put a lid on them, to stop them, and seeing people's small businesses destroyed, innocent people, really, their lives harmed. I think that they're going to have to pass it. I agree with you. And they would have liked to have held off until after the election, but that might not be possible. But
Kerry, I was in downtown Seattle a couple of weeks back, and man, it is apocalyptic. There are whole stretches. It was like 10:30 on a weekday when I was there, 10:30 in the morning, and there are whole blocks in Seattle where everything's closed and windows are boarded up, and the only people walking down the street are apparently homeless. They're kind of shuffling down the street, carrying their possessions and stuff like that. And that's Seattle. That was a really vibrant city 6 months ago. And man, it really looks like it's a place that has died now. So that has to be affecting the state and national economy, to have big cities like that just be shut down in so many places. So yeah, we can't possibly have a recovery until these cities get their acts together, stop the rioting one way or another, and then get their downtowns open. And it doesn't seem like we're anywhere near that based on what I saw in Seattle. So I think a lot of these recovery numbers, the economy's snapping back and the third quarter is going to see dramatic growth. That doesn't match with my experience of a lot of these places. So I think that we're in a lot worse shape than some of the macro numbers seem to imply, which again, it implies a big stimulus package coming next year or later this year. And the numbers are going to be so huge. Already we're taking on immense amounts of debt, but let us take on even more debt, and in an open-ended way where, it's not going to end. We're not going to stop trying to engineer higher inflation until we get it. We're not going to stop bailing out everybody in sight until jobs start bubbling up organically from the economy. And it doesn't seem like we're anywhere near that. So the amount of debt we're going to have to take on to get us to that place is going to be so immense that it basically plays into the whole dollar collapse thesis. We're now following that script where a crisis happens that governments have no choice but to bail us out of in every way possible. And that shifts the pressure over to the currencies, because who wants to hold the currency of a country that's doing that, who's borrowing 10 or 15% of GDP and just throwing it at industries that might be dead regardless. And that's what we're doing right now with trying to bail out airlines, for instance, or cruise lines or movie theater chains. It's not clear that these industries survive in their current forms no matter what we do. So if we dump $1 trillion into that project and it doesn't work, that $1 trillion is just gone. So that's the thing we're wrestling with right now, and it doesn't look really doable from whatever angle you approach it from. So I don't know. I'm very worried about next year, and because of that, more optimistic than ever about gold and silver, because that's where people run or hide out in when things get truly crazy. And it does feel like that's the kind of year that's coming.
Hey, we're seeing the gold price, it hit 2000. Now it's been consolidating since August, but it's not really heading down. It's not very positive consolidation pattern. I'll just point out to you that I had Alistair McLeod on from Gold Money, and he said that Jerome Powell is the current John Law. Which, if you're not familiar, he's the one that printed the French into hyperinflation and oblivion, and now Powell's kind of doing the same thing. The difference is that the dollar is the reserve currency, and while there's talk of de-dollarization, the actual act of doing it is a lot harder than they would have you believe. I just find it really interesting that really there's nothing here that can stop it. New York City, half the restaurants are going to close up. Half. That's a huge number.
Yeah, and a huge industry for employment. I mean, what do you do in New York City when you get there? You drive a cab or you work in a restaurant, basically, while you're pursuing your other career. Well, if you take that away, people don't have their basic job with which to survive while they're, pursuing their Broadway career or trying to break into Madison Avenue or whatever, Wall Street, whatever you're trying for. So if you take that rung off the ladder, it's not clear how the New York City economy works or the Los Angeles economy. So yeah, this is by no means over. And the gold story is getting more and more interesting because mainstream investment banks and financial advisors are now starting to recommend gold to their clients. In part, not that they necessarily, a lot of them understand the concept of precious metals, but they're seeing it go up. When something goes up, money managers and financial advisors get calls from their clients saying, hey, how come I'm not in gold? This thing has been doing this, blah, blah, and so there's a lot of pressure on these guys to say, okay, well, we'll add 1 or 2% to your portfolio. But the thing is, the gold market at about $10 trillion is so much smaller than the mainstream investable capital market. In other words, stocks, bonds, and real estate, that even 1 or 2% of those markets flowing into precious metals, because it's like $600 trillion if you add the big three capital markets together. And if you just take, say, 3 or 4 percentage points of that and move it into a $10 trillion market, it's not clear how that's physically possible. So, you would see some extreme price moves during that transition, and that would bleed over into gold and silver mining stocks. So you'd see the stocks go up even more than metals, which is normally how it happens in a bull market. But this would be an unusual bull market because of the amount of new capital flowing into the sector. So I think we can easily see a doubling of gold and a quintupling of silver in the next couple of years, assuming that these funds flows go in the direction it looks like they're going to, because the money manager who's not advocating gold for his clients is almost in the minority now. It used to be hardly anybody wanted to put their clients into gold. Now some big names, the last ones were just in the last week, it was, I think, Wells Fargo and UBS, who came out with really positive statements about gold. And, those guys account for a huge amount of capital. And they're not the only ones. Lots of other big time investment banks are, taking the same position now, that it's time to get into precious metals as protection against financial instability and as a momentum play. So now you've got pretty much across the mainstream spectrum good reasons to be in precious metals, because if you're really cautious, then obviously you like safe haven assets. If you're a speculator who likes to ride trends, then you like precious metals because they're in a confirmed uptrend now, even with the little correction that has happened just lately. So, and if they end up doing more stimulus checks where they just send another $1,200 per person or whatever out there to everybody, a lot of that money is going to flow into the hands of Robinhood stock traders, right? The millennials who instead of playing video games took their stimulus checks and opened accounts at Robinhood and started aggressively trading momentum stocks. So if that happens, that's a lot of new money flowing into the momentum sector, of which gold and silver are now a part. So it could be that the government now is in effect actively pumping up the precious metals market. So be it. It's about time.
So they either do it wittingly or they do it unwittingly. Anything you're expecting to see the next week or two, John, that we should keep an eye out for? Or mainstreamers going into gold, do you think?
Well, I mean, that's not like a next week kind of event. That's a long-term big trend that's building up that could play out over the next few years, where once gold becomes a momentum play on top of a safety play in the eyes of most people, then that trend has legs, because that's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy for a while. When people buy something because it's going up, they make it go up more, and then more people come in, and that's the kind of thing that's liable to play out in precious metals over the next few years. The next few weeks have a lot of things that could be pretty intense. I mean, we still don't know for sure how Trump's going to do with the coronavirus. We don't know how the Senate is going to be able to do what it does. We don't know how this election is going to play out physically. Like they still don't really seem to have decided whether to have it be mail-in ballots completely or open physical polling places. And the states that have never done, overall mail-in ballots, how they're going to handle it, because it's a brand new thing for them, and they're going to have to go from 0 to 100 miles an hour in the space of a couple of months during a presidential election. And, we just don't know how that's going to play out. So the whole contested election thing, I think, is the big risk in the short run, where, a lot of people vote physically for Trump because his voters are more likely to do that. And he ends the election night with a huge lead, and then all the mail-in ballots are counted, and that takes a really long time because we don't know how to do it well. And a lot of them are contested, and then Biden creeps back into contention and then maybe into a lead. And then how does everybody handle that? We don't know how people are going to react to election chaos, with everybody being as angry as they are right now. So if the election bleeds over into civil unrest and the new Supreme Court justice ends up being the swing vote to decide this whole thing, it sounds chaotic, and it could easily be. So that could be the big story for the early part of 2021. And if it plays out that way, I don't necessarily think it's likely to play out that way, but it's definitely a possibility. And man, that is just that's going to be civil unrest on steroids for a lot of parts of the country.
I think either way, we're going to see civil unrest. Supposedly, the rumor is that after the election, regardless how it goes, Trump invokes the Insurrection Act of 1807, I think it was, and then sends in the troops, puts down these riots. Supposedly, they've been infiltrated, all their cell phones and all their cell phone traffic, all their emails, and they know exactly who's involved, the political figures who are involved, and the media figures who've been enabling them. And it's all going to come down, but I'll believe all that when I see it. But I do know that they can easily be stopped if the will exists to actually stop them.
Well, Kerry, I think the whole and a lot of liberal friends have said this to me. Oh, he's not going to leave office. He wants to be a dictator. He's just going to declare martial law. And that he's clearly trolling the Democrats when he says stuff like, well, I'll accept a fair verdict, something like that. I won't accept one if they steal the election. What he's doing is just trying to freak out the left. And, he's really good at that. And I think that's basically what it is. He can't possibly have any intention of ignoring a fair and free election, which he loses, and then sticking around as a dictator. That's just no way that's going to happen.
That's not going to happen. And I don't believe the mail-in ballot chaos is going to happen. I think these are all red herrings to stir up the base and say he's a dictator and all of this. And so far, really, it's quite the contrary. He's allowed the states and the municipalities, the localities, to address most of the issues with guidance and support from Washington, but he hasn't sent the troops in. And I think it's just part of the thing to drum up their base. But in any event, welcome back, John. It's great to have you back. We missed you. And to all of you out there, let us know what you think. Email us, kl@kerrylutz.com. Check out both our newsletters. Of course, John is at dollarcollapse.com. We're at financialsurvivalnetwork.com. Sign up for our free newsletters. John, we'll talk to you next week. Welcome back again.
Thanks, Kerry. See you next week.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.